The Kylar Dominion Expeditionary Fleet was a sight to behold. Thousands of warships arranged in perfect geometric formations, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly metallic sheen under the distant light of Sol. Each vessel was a masterpiece of alien engineering, from a nimble strike craft barely larger than Earth's obsolete space shuttles to the massive dreadnoughts stretching several kilometers in length. They had arrived 3 Earth days ago, emerging from what humans would call hyperspace in a coordinated maneuver that spoke of centuries of interstellar military doctrine. Within hours, they had established a complete blockade of Earth, their ships positioned in overlapping defensive patterns that allowed no civilian vessel to escape and no military ship to approach without being immediately targeted by dozens of weapon systems. On the command bridge of the Dominion's Reach, the flagship of the Kylar fleet, High Admiral Forlag stood with his 4 arms clasped behind his back, his posture rigid as he stared at the main tactical display. The Kylar commander was a veteran of 17 planetary conquests and 34 major space engagements. His exoskeleton bore the ceremonial etchings of his victories, and the cranial crest that distinguished his prestigious bloodline was adorned with the metallic pins of his rank and achievements. Yet, despite his impressive record and the overwhelming force at his disposal, Forlag found himself in a situation he had never anticipated: a stalemate. "Status report," he demanded, his voice carrying the distinct clicking undertones characteristic of senior Kylar officers, a speech pattern deliberately cultivated to convey authority. First Commander Zyvex approached, data pad in hand. "No change, High Admiral. Our weapons remain ineffective against the human outpost defensive systems. All conventional approaches have failed." Forlag clicked his mandibles in irritation. "Impossible. We have the firepower to reduce continents to ash. How can a single orbital installation resist us?" Before him, the holographic display showed the object of his growing frustration, Galileo Outpost. By all appearances, it was an unremarkable human structure, a cylindrical base with extending solar arrays and communication dishes, positioned in lunar orbit. Initial scans had categorized it as a scientific research station or perhaps a minor transit hub. It should have been vaporized in the opening moments of the invasion, a footnote in the conquest of Earth. Instead, it had become an impenetrable obstacle. "Show me the latest attack sequence," Forlag ordered. The tactical display shifted, replaying footage from the most recent assault. A squadron of Kylar cruisers approached the outpost, their forward batteries charging with devastating energy. They fired in perfect synchronization, beams of concentrated plasma that should have cut through the station like a ceremonial blade through flesh. But as the beams reached a certain perimeter around the outpost, something extraordinary happened. The very fabric of space seemed to ripple and distort. The energy weapons bent away from their targets, some dispersing harmlessly into space, others curving back toward their source, forcing the Kylar ships to take evasive action. "Enhance Sector 4, Forlag commanded, his compound eyes narrowing. The display zoomed in, showing what appeared to be localized gravitational anomalies surrounding the station. Not traditional shield technology, but something far more sophisticated, manipulations of space-time itself that rendered conventional attacks useless. "We've analyzed all 27 assault attempts," Zyvex reported. "Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, guided munitions, even our quantum disruptors, all ineffective. It's as if the station is surrounded by localized pockets of warped reality. Our targeting systems cannot compensate, and our weapons cannot penetrate." Forlag suppressed a frustrated hiss. "What about our infiltration drones? Disabled before they cross the defensive perimeter. We believe the humans are generating artificial gravitational fields that interfere with our guidance systems." The bridge fell silent as Forlag contemplated this information. The Kylar Dominion had conquered 17 star systems with the fleet currently surrounding Earth. They had faced and overcome civilizations with technologies far more advanced than what human intelligence suggested Earth possessed. Yet here they were, thousands of warships rendered impotent by a single station. High Admiral, another officer approached, this one bearing the insignia of communications. We're detecting an increase in energy readings from a station. They appear to be scanning us extensively. Forlag turned his attention back to the display. His initial arrogance had given way to confusion, and now, though he would never admit it aloud, a creeping sense of concern. Something was very wrong about this. Scenario and strategic doctrine dictated that unknown variables must be identified before proceeding. Open a secure channel to the human outpost, he ordered finally. It's time we understood what we're dealing with. The communications officer complied, establishing a connection. After several moments, the main view screen flickered and the image of a human appeared. The being was clearly male by Kylar understanding of human physiology, with short gray hair and features that suggested middle age by their species standards. He wore what appeared to be civilian attire rather than military uniform. A simple dark garment with a small insignia over the left chest that Kylar databases identified as belonging to Earth's International Space Coalition. This is High Admiral Forlag of the Kylar Dominion Expeditionary Fleet, Forlag announced, his translator converting his clicking speech into the human's primary language. You will identify yourself and surrender your installation immediately. Further resistance is futile and will result in Dr. Eris Thorne, the human interrupted, an act that sent a ripple of indignation through the Kylar officers present. Scientific Director of Galileo Outpost. I was wondering when you decided to talk instead of wasting energy on those attacks. The casual tone and lack of fear was jarring. Forlag had seen planetary governors and military commanders tremble before him. This human, a scientist, not even a warrior, showed only mild irritation, as if the fleet surrounding his world was nothing more than an inconvenience. You are in no position to display such insolence, Forlag responded. Your defenses, while temporarily effective, cannot withstand sustained assault. The full might of the Dominion. With respect, High Admiral, Thorne interrupted again, we both know that's not true. You've thrown everything short of a Nova bomb at this station, and you're no closer to breaching our defenses than when you arrived. I suggest we skip the threats and discuss why you've blockaded Earth. While this exchange occurred, neither Forlag nor his officers noticed the subtle probing happening within their communication systems. The moment the channel had opened, an advanced Earth AI designated Daedalus had begun analyzing the Kylar network protocols, mapping pathways, and identifying potential vulnerabilities. It worked silently, its operations masked by the normal communication signal. Forlag, his pride wounded but his tactical mind still sharp, recognized that a change of approach was necessary. Our intentions are simple. Earth represents a strategic position in this sector of space. The Dominion requires your world's resources and strategic location. Surrender now, and your people will be allowed to exist under Dominion protection. Resist, and we will find a way to overcome your defenses, however long it takes. On the screen, Thorne appeared to consider this, though in reality, he was waiting for confirmation from Daedalus that enough information had been gathered. A small indicator in his peripheral vision flashed green. I'm afraid we must decline your generous offer, Thorne responded. Earth remains sovereign territory. We have no desire for conflict with the Kylar Dominion, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. Forlag's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of mounting irritation that his officers recognized with concern. You leave us no choice but to escalate our efforts. Your defenses have peculiarities we have not encountered before, but they are technology nonetheless, and all technology can be overcome. A new officer approached Forlag, speaking in low tones. High Admiral, our cyber warfare division believes they have identified vulnerabilities in the Outpost network. They request permission to launch a comprehensive digital assault to disable the defensive systems. Forlag nodded approvingly. The Kylar excelled at technological warfare. It was often their preferred first strike before physical weapons were engaged. Proceed immediately. On the screen, Thorne's expression remained unchanged, though a subtle smile might have touched the corners of his mouth. I would advise against cyber attacks, High Admiral. Digital warfare can have Unexpected consequences. The warning was ignored. Moments later, the Kylar launched their attack, a sophisticated multi-vector digital assault designed to overwhelm and compromise Galileo's systems. What they didn't realize was that this was precisely what Thorne and his team had been waiting for. As the attack penetrated the Outpost's outer network layers, it encountered what appeared to be standard defensive protocols. The Kylar cyber warfare specialists reported initial success, their confidence growing as they pushed deeper. But they were not infiltrating Galileo's systems. They were being drawn into a carefully constructed digital labyrinth, and at its center waited Daedalus. The AI had been designed, not for warfare, but for managing the incredibly complex physics of Galileo's defensive systems. It understood multidimensional mathematics and quantum field theories in ways that even its creators sometimes struggled to follow. When the Kylar attack reached the core of the trap, Daedalus initiated its countermeasure, not to destroy, but to infiltrate and confound. The first signs that something was wrong came from minor systems throughout the Kylar fleet. On a destroyer near the outer perimeter, the environmental controls suddenly recalibrated, plunging crew quarters into freezing temperatures while raising bridge temperatures to uncomfortable levels. On 3 cruisers, interior communication systems began broadcasting what Earth databases identified as Symphony No. 9" by Beethoven. Tactical displays on dozens of ships flickered, momentarily replacing military data with images of Earth felines. Forlag was in the middle of issuing new orders when the main lights on the bridge dimmed, then returned with a blue tint that made all personnel appear sickly. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Unknown, High Admiral," came the panicked response from his technology officer. "We're experiencing system anomalies across the fleet. Nothing critical yet, but..." The officer never finished his sentence. The main tactical display suddenly showed the fleet's formations dissolving as ships began to move of their own accord. Propulsion systems activated and deactivated seemingly at random. Smaller vessels began spinning on their axes, while larger ships drifted into new positions, forming what appeared to human eyes like enormous geometric patterns in space. "Shut down all network systems," Forlag commanded, his disciplined veneer cracking as he watched his perfect formation dissolve into chaos. "Isolate the flagship's core functions." But it was too late. Daedalus had spread throughout the fleet's network like a digital wildfire, not destroying, but subverting. Ship after ship reported loss of navigational control. Weapon systems powered down or targeted empty space. Life support remained operational. Thorne had been explicit about avoiding casualties, but little else responded to Kylar commands. On the main view screen, which remarkably still functioned perfectly, Thorne's expression had changed from mild irritation to something approaching sympathy. "I tried to warn you, High Admiral," he said. "Now, perhaps we can have a more productive conversation." Forlag stood rigidly, his pride severely wounded, but his military discipline preventing any outward display of the rage he felt. Around him, his officers worked frantically to regain control of their systems, but to no avail. The mighty Kylar fleet, which had brought 17 solar systems to their knees, now drifted in humiliating disarray around the very planet they had come to conquer. "What have you done?" Forlag finally asked, his translator unable to fully convey the complex emotions in his native speech patterns. "We've temporarily assumed control of your fleet's operational systems," Thorne explained matter-of-factly. "No permanent damage has been done, and your life support remains completely functional. But I believe we've demonstrated that Earth is not the primitive world your intelligence suggested." The revelation struck Forlag like a physical blow. The Dominion's advanced scouts had reported Earth as a technologically developing world, only recently achieving limited interplanetary travel, with rudimentary weapons and defenses. Nothing in their intelligence had suggested capabilities like those now being demonstrated. Why reveal such power only now? Forlag demanded, his tactical mind working through the implications. If you possess such technology, why has Earth remained isolated, seemingly vulnerable until our arrival? An excellent question, Thorn acknowledged. One that deserves a comprehensive answer. I propose a temporary ceasefire and direct discussions. There are matters you need to be aware of, High Admiral. Information relevant not only to Earth security, but to the Kylar Dominion as well. Forlag conferred briefly with his senior officers. Their situation was clear. The fleet was compromised, their military advantage neutralized. Strategic doctrine dictated gathering intelligence when conventional approaches failed. I will meet with you, Forlag decided. You may board the Dominion's reach under diplomatic protection. Thorn shook his head. With respect, High Admiral, I think neutral ground would be preferable. Perhaps one of your smaller vessels, positioned halfway between your flagship and our outpost. After further deliberation, arrangements were made. For hours later, in the conference room of a Kylar scout vessel positioned as suggested, Forlag found himself seated across from the human scientist. Each had brought a small contingent of security personnel and advisors, though both understood that the true balance of power had shifted dramatically. I will be direct. Thorn began once formalities have been observed. Earth developed its defensive and cyber capabilities not because we anticipated your arrival, but because we detected something far more concerning in the regions of space bordering Kylar territory. He activated a holographic projector, displaying astronomical data and what appeared to be energy readings. Approximately 15 Earth years ago, our deep space monitoring stations began detecting anomalous energy signatures from several star systems near the edge of our observable range. Further investigation revealed pattern fluctuations consistent with artificial manipulation rather than natural phenomena. Forlag studied the data, his compound eyes narrowing. These signatures are unfamiliar to me. We call them void phantoms, Thorn continued. They appear to be entities composed of pure energy, capable of interstellar travel without conventional vessels. Over the past decade, we've documented their expansion pattern. The hologram shifted, showing a slowly spreading area of influence. They seem to feed on energy, stellar energy primarily, but also the energy produced by technological civilizations. You expect me to believe this? Forlag's skepticism was evident in his posture. The Dominion has the most extensive monitoring network in this sector of the galaxy. We would have detected such entities. Would you? Thorn asked, advancing the holographic display. Because our data shows at least 3 former Kylar outposts that have gone silent in the past 5 years, each following a similar pattern of energy fluctuations before communication ceased. He highlighted 3 points on the map, and Forlag felt an uncomfortable sensation along his exoskeleton. Those outposts had indeed gone silent, but Dominion Command had attributed the losses to local insurrections or technical failures. There had been no follow-up investigations due to the outposts' remote locations and limited strategic value. This proves nothing, Forlag insisted, though with less conviction. Outposts fail for many reasons, which is why we have more compelling evidence, Thorn responded, producing a data crystal. This contains intercepted communications from your own outposts before they went dark. Our quantum array detected these signals because we were specifically looking for evidence of the phantoms. Your monitoring systems, focused on conventional threats, likely filtered them out as background noise. Reluctantly, Forlag inserted the crystal into a Kylar reader. The recordings were fragmented but unmistakably from Kylar sources. Emergency transmissions describing unexplainable energy drains, equipment failures, and finally observations of what the personnel described as living light penetrating their facilities. This could be fabricated, Forlag suggested, but his tone lacked conviction. To what end? Thorn challenged. To trick you into avoiding a conquest of Earth. If that were our goal, our demonstration with your fleet would have been sufficient. No, High Admiral, we're sharing this because the threat is real and expanding. Based on our projections, the Phantoms will reach major Kylar population centers within 3 years, and Earth within 5. The implications were staggering. If Thorn was telling the truth, then the Dominion faced an existential threat they hadn't even been aware of. But Forlag's training made him cautious, This could still be an elaborate human deception. I must consult with Dominion Command, he decided. This information, if verified, requires coordination at the highest levels. Of course, Thorn agreed. But I should warn you, based on our limited understanding of Kylar politics, there may be factions within your leadership who already know about this threat and have chosen to ignore it, or who will refuse to acknowledge it for reasons of their own. Forlag found this suggestion offensive, but not entirely implausible. The Dominion's political structure was complex, with various houses vying for influence and sometimes pursuing independent agendas. The military was supposed to be above such maneuvering, but in reality, senior commanders often aligned with particular political factions. Upon returning to the Dominion's reach, Forlag established a secure channel to Dominion Command. The response to his report was troubling. Instead of the concern or even skepticism he expected, he was met with immediate dismissal. "These are obviously human fabrications," declared Supreme Commander Krell, a political appointee who had never seen actual combat. "They are attempting to manipulate you, Forlag. Your failure to quickly subjugate this primitive world is disappointing. Perhaps your reputation exceeds your capabilities." "Supreme Commander, with respect, the evidence warrants further investigation," Forlag insisted. "If there's even a possibility that these void phantoms exist." "Enough," Krell interrupted. "You will continue your mission as ordered. Destroy this troublesome outpost by any means necessary, subjugate Earth, and return to Dominion space. These are your orders." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Forlag troubled. The dismissal had been too quick, too absolute. Either Krell was an incompetent fool, or there was something else at play. His concerns were confirmed when his second-in-command, Sub-Admiral Mekrith, approached him privately after the transmission. "Hi, Admiral. I must speak with you on a matter of grave importance," Mekrith began, his posture indicating extreme caution. "There are rumors among senior staff about Supreme Commander Krell's recent political alignments. He has become closely associated with House Vexkar." This was significant information. House Vexkar was known for its expansionist policies and had been pushing for accelerated conquest of neighboring systems, often at the expense of proper reconnaissance and security protocols. "You believe Krell is deliberately ignoring the potential threat?" Forlag asked. "I believe it's possible," Mekrith replied carefully. "House Vexkar has invested heavily in our current campaign. Acknowledging a greater threat would necessitate reallocation of resources away from their planned expansion." Forlag pondered this information as reports continued to come in about failing attempts to regain control of the fleet systems. The humans maintained their hold, though they had allowed basic functions to resume under Kylar control: life support, internal transportation, and non-weapon systems. After hours of deliberation, Forlag made a decision that would either mark him as a traitor or a savior to the Dominion. He requested another meeting with Thorn. "I need absolute verification of your claims," Forlag stated when they reconvened. "Not recordings or data that could be manipulated, but direct evidence that my own scientists can confirm." Thorn nodded understanding. "We anticipated this request. We're prepared to share our quantum array technology that allowed us to detect the phantoms in the first place. With it, your scientists can conduct their own observations." It was a significant concession. Sharing advanced technology with a potential enemy was not a decision made lightly, but it spoke to the seriousness with which the humans viewed the threat. Over the next 48 hours, a team of Kylar scientists worked alongside human experts, utilizing the quantum array to scan distant regions of space. The results confirmed Thorn's claims. There were indeed energy anomalies consistent with the described void phantoms, and they were following a clear expansion pattern that would eventually reach both Kylar and Earth territories. As Forlag reviewed these findings, Dominion Command sent new orders. House Vexkar was dispatching a special operations fleet to assist in the Earth conquest. Forlag understood the true meaning. He was being replaced, and the new fleet would likely have orders to eliminate him if he resisted. The situation came to a head sooner than expected. A faction within Forlag's own fleet, led by officers loyal to House Vexkar, attempted a mutiny. They managed to partially restore weapons control to several destroyers and launched an attack not only on Galileo Outpost, but also on ships known to be loyal to Forlag. What followed was a chaotic battle within the Kylar fleet itself. The rebelling ships had limited capabilities, their systems still partially compromised by Daedalus, but they compensated with reckless aggression. They fired on Galileo with whatever weapons they had managed to restore, only to have their attacks bent and distorted by the station's spacetime defenses. Forlag, commanding from the Dominion's reach, found himself in the unprecedented position of coordinating with human defenses. Thorn provided real-time data from Earth sensors, allowing Forlag to anticipate and counter the rebels' moves. Together, they managed to isolate and disable the mutinous vessels without destroying them, a difficult feat in space combat, made possible only by the complementary capabilities of human and Kylar technology. In the aftermath, with the rebel leaders secured and the immediate threat neutralized, Forlag faced the greatest decision of his long career. The evidence of the Void Phantoms was undeniable. The political corruption within the Dominion that would ignore such a threat was unacceptable, and the capabilities the humans had demonstrated made them valuable potential allies rather than subjects to be conquered. Standing on the bridge of the Dominion's reach, Forlag broadcast his decision to the entire fleet. By the authority vested in me as High Admiral of the Expeditionary Fleet, I hereby declare a formal alliance with Earth against the threat posed by the entities known as Void Phantoms. This action supersedes previous orders from Dominion Command, which I have reason to believe has been compromised by political interests acting against the security of the Dominion. It was unprecedented. No Kylar commander had ever defied Central Command so openly. But Forlag knew that once the full evidence was presented to the Dominion Council and the general population, his actions would be vindicated. Any vessel or personnel who cannot accept this decision will be granted safe passage back to Dominion space with a minimum crew, he continued. Those who choose to remain will be part of the first joint Kylar Human Defense Initiative in history. The response was mixed, but largely supportive. Most of Forlag's officers had seen the evidence themselves and recognized the logic of his decision. A number of ships departed, but the majority stayed. In the days that followed, an unprecedented collaboration began. The humans shared their advancements in artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and their revolutionary approach to physics that had created their unorthodox but effective defenses. The Kylar contributed their superior material science, their efficient faster-than-light drive systems, and their formidable energy weapon technology. Joint scientific teams analyzed data on the Void Phantoms, discovering that they were more intelligent, more organized, and moving more rapidly than either humans or Kylar had initially estimated. The threat was not years away, but months, perhaps less. The disappearance of the Kylar outposts had not been isolated incidents, but the vanguard of a coordinated expansion. Their pattern seems almost strategic, Thorn observed during one of the now regular joint briefings. He and Forlag had developed an unexpected professional respect for each other, different in almost every way, but united by their commitment to protecting their respective civilizations. They're targeting communication and early warning outposts first, then moving inward. A classic military approach, Forlag agreed. Blind your enemy before striking at vital targets. Together, they developed the framework for the first joint defense strategy. Earth would adapt its space-time manipulation technology to create an early warning perimeter at the edge of the solar system, while Kylar vessels, now partially upgraded with human AI assistance, would form a mobile response force. Additional beacons would be positioned along the projected path of the Phantom's advance, creating a network that could track their movements and potentially predict their targets. Perhaps most remarkably, the atmosphere among the combined forces began to shift. The initial suspicion and hostility gave way to a reluctant respect as human and Kylar personnel worked together. Cultural exchanges were awkward at first. Kylar found human humor incomprehensible, while humans struggled with the complex hierarchical protocols of Kylar social interaction, but common ground was gradually established. 2 weeks after the alliance was formalized, the the first joint patrol fleet departed. It consisted of 3 Kylar cruisers, each now hosting human technical advisors, and 2 Earth vessels that had been retrofitted with Kylar propulsion systems for better maneuverability. Their mission was to establish the first line of the early warning network and conduct detailed scans of the regions where phantom activity had been detected. On the observation deck of the Dominion's Reach, Forlag and Thorn watched the departure, the Earth and Kylar vessels flying in formation against the backdrop of space. They said it couldn't be done, Thorn remarked. A week ago, our species were on the brink of war. Now we're allies. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Forlag responded, his translator struggling to convey the subtle inflections of philosophical reflection in his native speech. In my 17 conquests, I never encountered a situation like this. Perhaps it was overdue. Thorn turned to look at the Kylar commander. You know, when your fleet first arrived, I thought it was the end for Earth. Now I'm starting to think it might have been the best thing that could have happened. Forlag's compound eyes shifted to focus on the human. Explain. If you hadn't come when you did, we would have continued to monitor the phantoms from a distance, thinking we had years to prepare. We wouldn't have accelerated our defensive development, wouldn't have pushed Daedalus to its limits. And when the phantoms finally reached us, we would have faced them alone. As with the Dominion, Forlag acknowledged, our arrogance would have prevented us from recognizing the threat until it was too late. Perhaps there is wisdom in the universe that we do not yet comprehend. Behind them, Earth was visible through the observation port, a blue jewel set against the vastness of space. Around it, the combined fleet of human and Kylar vessels maintained their vigilant positions, no longer enemies, but reluctant partners in the face of a greater threat. Neither Forlag nor Thorn harbored any illusions about the challenges ahead. The Void Phantoms remained largely unknown, their capabilities not fully understood, their intentions a mystery, except for their apparent hunger for energy. The alliance between Earth and the Kylar was fragile, built on necessity rather than trust, and complicated by the political ramifications within the Dominion once news of Forlag's defiance reached the homeworld. But as they stood there, watching the patrol fleet disappear into the distance, there was a shared understanding. The stalemate that had begun their encounter had transformed into something neither could have anticipated, a partnership that might just save both their worlds from the darkness that waited in the void.